War. That's where we start. At the end of the Civil War, the United States had some interesting things in relations to military. Now, the blacks served in the Union Army during the Civil War, and they did very well in the Union Army. And most people do not realize 180,000 soldiers, black soldiers, served in the Union Army during the Civil War. 180,000. Of the 180,000, 37,300 black soldiers officially gave their life during the Civil War. So this was a serious thing. And when I'm with students, I make a point to tell students of all colors, there's never been a war to defend the American flag that black soldiers did not fight for that flag. There's never, ever been a war. And then some people say, well, no, there is no well. We were there forever. Now, after the war, here's the big dilemma. What to do with black soldiers in peaceful times? What to do with them in peaceful times? On the United States Congress, the Senate floor, there was a heavy debate in 1866, and this is how the debate went. A lot of the senators, especially from the South, debated that the United States military should not include black soldiers. And they were very adamant about it, and they took a strong position. And part of their position, and it wasn't just the Southern Congress, but this is what the records say. There was a set of Congress people that made this statement, these sets of statements. We question the courage of blacks. We question the intelligence of blacks. We question the discipline and the bravery of blacks. We don't think they have those attributes. And that is our position on why they should not be in the United States military after the Civil War. That was their platform, and they refused to back off of that platform. So it went back and forth, where the black men were worthy. The key word is worthy to be soldiers in the United States Army. Now remember those criteria as I go through this speech of the platform about bravery and courage and discipline. Just remember those things as we journey tonight. So there was a compromise reached in late 1866, and this was the compromise in the United States Congress. The compromise was this: we will fund and establish blacks in the United States military with 3 conditions. The first condition was they have to serve in all segregated units. They cannot serve in white. They cannot be mixed with whites. They all have to be segregated. The second was they cannot be officers. All of the officers have to be white officers. The third condition was these white officers had to be former Civil War veterans who had the experience to lead men. And hopefully they led men in the Union Army. So those are the 3 conditions that were set forth in that compromise to establish that blacks could serve. So out of 1866, the legislative bodies in Congress set forth the establishment of 2 cavalry troops and 4 regiment troops. The 2 cavalry troops were the 9th Cavalry and the 10th Cavalry, and then there were 4 infantry, or what they call regiment troops. Tonight we're going to concentrate on the 9th Cavalry and the 10th Cavalry. Now, once they established that, they had the assignments for the 9th Cavalry. They would be assigned for training in Greenville, Louisiana. The 10th Cavalry would go to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for their training. So you've got the 9th going in Louisiana, and you got the 10th going in Kansas. Now, once the word circulated that black men could join the United States Army, you can imagine the stir of anxiety and the stir of men who really wanted to enlist in the Army. So there was a barrage of men, especially, let's just say in the 9th Cavalry. You had former Union soldiers who, ironically, Louisiana, a lot of ex-Union soldiers resided in Louisiana after the Civil War, and especially in Baton Rouge. But there were farmers, cooks, ex-slaves, okay? All of these men trying to enlist. And what would make them enlist? You got to remember, we're talking 1866, 1 year after slavery was abolished. a lot of these men had never had these kind of jobs before. And a lot of these men were just like all men in America. They just wanted to improve their lives. They wanted to improve their families' lives. And a lot of these men just wanted to wear the American uniform. That's what a lot of people do. They simply wanted to put on that uniform and become part of, quote, mainstream America, if they could. So the initial pay for the black soldiers was not equal to the pay of the white soldiers. White soldiers, $13 a month. Black soldiers, $10 a month. But the blacks did not complain at that time because most of them had not had a job where they had housing, clothing, stable pay, great living. So there was not a big qualm about the difference in pay. Now, a lot of obstacles, and just put in your mind tonight as they go through these obstacles. The first obstacle that they faced was to meet the criteria of having the white officers. A lot of white officers backed off. They said, ain't no way in the world I'm going to serve with these blacks because it's going to be a stigma, it's going to be a stain on my career, and I'm going to have this peer pressure from my peers of white officers if I join this newly established black cavalry, 9th or 10th. So initially, there was a big backlash that the white officers just did not want to do it. Pretty soon, there was another compromise, a little soft compromise. They said, okay, if you will lead these black troops, we can expedite your promotion opportunities. Okay, so the incentive was to some of the white officers, it'll be a quicker path to promotions that may have taken you a little bit longer. And then in addition to that, some of the ex-Civil War Union officers said, it'll be an honor to serve with them because I served with them in the Civil War, and I know they made great soldiers. So between the combination of those criteria, enough white officers were finally found. So the training started, but here's an unusual obstacle that they had to deal with. And this one kind of hit especially the white officers right between the eyes. Initial training, especially in the 9th and also in the 10th, 90% of the men were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. Now, that's not a stark thing for 1867, especially in the South, in the pre-Civil War, where states like North Carolina had specific laws that slaves were prohibited from learning to read and write. And if you're not familiar with it, North Carolina passed a law in 1830 that it was definitely against the state of North Carolina laws to let any slave and some other blacks learn how to read and write. So it's a stark thing to have to deal with, but it's reality in the year 1866, 1867. So these white officers had to figure out, how are we going to lead troops when they can't read the signs and they can't read the posters and things like that? So a workaround was some of the chaplains, the white chaplains, and some of the ex-Union soldiers who could read or write said, we'll take the lead. We'll do it at night. We'll do it around the campfires. But we'll figure out how to overcome this hurdle. It's going to take us some time, but it's not going to stop us. But it did slow them down. Now, the first year of training in Louisiana and in Fort Leavenworth was slow because the men were not treated equal to the white soldiers, and that's going to be ongoing through this whole lecture. They quickly realized that the United States government was going to treat them permanently as second-class soldiers. Second-class soldiers. Even though they wore the same uniform as those white soldiers, they quickly realized that they weren't equal to their white counterparts. And ongoing, the white soldiers, and it's just something I've asked some ex-military people about it. The white soldiers in the 1860s harassed the black soldiers on an ongoing basis, taunting them, harassing them, verbally harassing them. And the United States government didn't really do too much about it. Now, the 9th and the 10th, when I say second rate, they received second-rate living quarters. They received second-rate horses, and horses were so critical. They received second-rate clothing and second-rate ammunition and rifles. Everything they were given was second rate, second rate, second rate, second rate. But they kept training. They kept working. They kept drilling because they were determined to improve their lives. And they, like I said, they wanted to be soldiers. So up until 1866, until 1867, they were still in this training area, and they got better and better and better. In the year 1867, the United States government gave the Ninth and the 10th their deployment orders. The Ninth was sent to Texas, and the 10th was to stay at Fort Leavenworth, but move out into Nebraska, Oklahoma, the Dakotas, and places like that. So they had the terrain. The Ninth going to Texas was to realize that Texas was the most chaotic, roughest, meanest, toughest region in the West in 1867 was the area of Texas called the Rio Grande. There was nothing in the Wild West that matched the Rio Grande area. Now, contrary to what we see on Hollywood, the 10th Cavalry especially, they were given one quick assignment, and that was to protect those Kansas Pacific Railroad workers. They were building the railroads across the United States, and they would come under attack often. So one of their immediate assignments was to protect those essential railroad workers. So that's what the 10th. Now, people ask, where on earth did they get the name the Buffalo Soldiers? About a year later, and I'll back up, but about a year later, the Native Americans, and I'll call them Native Americans, maybe I should call them indigenous, but I'll use the term Native American tonight. The Native Americans gave the 10th Cavalry the name the Buffalo Soldiers because to the Native Americans, the buffalo was a strong, majestic animal. So they picked the buffalo, and this is what they said. They were curious about the hair on the heads of the black soldiers because the hair on the heads of the black soldiers looked just like the curly, thick hair on the back of the buffalo. So on the back of the buffalo, there's this little thick patch of curly hair that they said looked just like our hair. So they honored the buffalo, and they said, you guys are Buffalo Soldiers. So that's how they really got the name, the Buffalo Soldiers. It was a term of respect, and the 10th Cavalry understood it. And we'll talk about the battles, but they did earn some respect out there. So that's how they got the name. The 10th Cavalry fully embraced it, and pretty soon they actually put it on their official uniform. And later on, the 9th Cavalry in Texas also adopted to become known as the Buffalo Soldiers. But now, they were to serve out on the western frontier for 24 years. From 1867 up through the 1890s, the Buffalo Soldiers were out there on the Old West, just like everybody else. Now, you won't see them on those pictures, on the western pictures, but instead of all those little pretty white troops that we see in those pictures, half of those troops were definitely Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers, especially in the 10th, they had to fight against, unfortunately, the Native Americans, the Mexican revolutionaries, the outlaws, the cattle rustlers, every type of opposition. They had to deal with it. But they also had the obligation to protect those towns and settlements. That's what they had to do. They had to escort, and I love some Westerns, they had to escort a lot of those wagon trains. And I looked at wagon train this morning, but you do not see black cavalry troops on TV. The Buffalo Soldiers had a definite, distinct job of escorting those wagon trains across the western frontiers. All of this is recorded information coming from the military archives. This information I'm sharing with you, this is all coming from the U.S. official military records on the Buffalo Soldiers. They also had to protect cities and settlers that didn't even want them around. Can you imagine a group of black soldiers riding into town and the white settlers coming out like, and gawking? That's what the report said, gawking like, how on earth did they become soldiers? because, especially the ones in Texas coming from the South, they still saw them as slaves. So they had so much human opposition, but yet they still had to do their job. Sometimes the sheriffs would tell them, you can't even come in town to shop. You remember how they used to tell us? Okay. Well, they told them, you can't even come in town to shop. You can't go to the bars. You can't go to the saloons. So sometimes in certain cities, the white officers had to go in and buy all the goods because the black soldiers who were protecting those towns were not allowed to do it. So the Buffalo Soldiers had a lot of obstacles to deal with, and their only goal was just to be soldiers. Now, the Badlands, the Badlands up in near the Dakotas, they were also violent, and the United States had a hard time getting mail through the Badlands. The U.S. mail carriers, for some reason, were attacked to the point that they said we can't do the job. We simply can't carry the mail. So the United States government gave the duties to the white cavalry troops. And the white cavalry troops came back after half a year and said, we don't want to do it because we're losing too many men. It's too violent, and we just don't want to do it. Then the government said, okay, we got one more option, and they won't have a choice. We're going to demand that the Buffalo Soldiers carry the U.S. mail. So everybody else got an option, but the Buffalo Soldiers were told, you're going to have to carry it because nobody else can do it. The Buffalo Soldiers carried the U.S. mail in the Badlands with honor, and they did it with high rates of success. Now, there was one young 21-year-old that's instilled in the archives, a young guy by the name of Private Fillmore Roberts. He was a really good, strong carrier of the mail. One day in Kansas, he was given some highly classified, got to get to Fort Gibson in Oklahoma mail. So he's in Kansas, and Fillmore Roberts was given this ultra sensitive that absolutely had to get to Fort Gibson. So he left in the dead of winter, according to military records, headed to Fort Gibson, but he never made it. Then, of course, the white officers and in the 7th and 4th Cavalry and things said, told y'all you can't trust them, you can't trust them. We told you. So the United States government quickly called him a deserter. But that was the winter. In the early spring, an expedition troop going through the same area and crossing the rivers, they came across this body that was wedged in branches and willows. You know how they get stuck in the river. And they noticed, they said, that's a soldier. We can tell that's a soldier because, he still got on his uniform. And they went to retrieve the soldier, and they saw the emblems, but they also saw that patch with the mail in it. It was strapped across his neck and under his arms. Apparently, he had tied it around his neck and under his arms, and in the dead of winter, Fillmore Roberts had tried to cross a swollen river trying to get to Fort Gibson, and he didn't make it. So his body was wedged for a couple of months in there. So they went back and honored him because he gave his life just trying to do the one task of trying to get that mail to Fort Gibson. But it just shows you the dedication and opposition of what these soldiers had to go through. Now, let's go to Texas. The wild Texas, the Rio Grande. The 9th Cavalry was sent to Texas, and unlike the white cavalry troops, the white cavalry troops would rotate in and stay for 2 years, and then they would rotate out, and then another cavalry unit of white troops would come in. So the white troops would rotate on 2-year basis in and out of Texas just to give them some mental relief. The black soldiers, the 9th Cavalry, never rotated out. They never rotated out. Most of those guys served their entire commitment in Texas. Now, they had, with this low ammunition and these poor rifles, This is what they did to overcome it. And they told the new recruits, look, we don't have a lot of bullets. So if you're going to be a top-notch Buffalo Soldier, you got to make the bullets count. Don't be shooting when they're way, way away. You got to wait till they are close, and then we're going to open fire because we don't have enough bullets for you to be shooting around. And the second thing is you've got to be an expert rifleman. You've got to be an expert shot. So in order to be part of the 9th, to overcome the low ammunition, the history record said they had some of the greatest marksmen in the cavalry because that's what they had to do. They had to make all of the bullets count. So instead of squawking, complaining, and whining, they just said, nope, that's what we're going to do. Now, I don't understand why they did this, but the 9th Cavalry loved hand-to-hand combat. I don't know why they did it. I don't understand it, but a lot of the military records, when they dismounted and fought hand-to-hand, they were some serious fighting guys. Now, there was a joke made, it was a joke. They said, look, if they had all them old horses, they could not run them Native American ponies, so they had to do something. I don't like the joke, but you know, they said they had to slow down and fight because they couldn't catch anybody. Because all of their horses were cast-offs from the white troops. And I'll read you a couple of reports here. This is some of the reports because the white officers were always filing reports on this second-rate equipment, second-rate conditions, second-rate. This is what Captain Carpenter filed in 1870 from Camp Supply. He says, I inspected the conditions surrounding the 10th Cavalry, and I am officially filing this report. The 10th Cavalry is getting nothing but old, mean, and worn-out horses. They are clearly throwaways from the more favorite 7th Cavalry. That was General Custer. He was in the 7th. Some of these horses die within days of getting here. Since the first mounts and horses in 1867 until now in 1870, the 10th Cavalry has received nothing but broken down horses and old repaired equipment. I'm willing to come to Congress or anywhere to testify on the injustices given to these troops. Edward Hatch filed this report on the 10th in Fort Sill, and I think that's Oklahoma, Fort Sill. He says, upon arrival, I found the morale and the spirit high among the troops, although some of the new recruits still needed training. Upon my review of the equipment and the horses, I was shocked at what I saw. These were definitely cast-off horses from the 7th and maybe the 4th Cavalry. I inspected 48 horses, and of the 48 horses, 45 of these horses had to be 15 years old or older. Yet, these troops take excellent care of these old animals as if they're newborn animals. They treat them with care. Most of their artillery was so old, I myself feared to even fire it. Captain Kennedy's men in the G Company were so undersupplied with ammunition, so under low on ammunition, I did not understand how they carried out their duties. I too am filing a grievance report signed Edward Hatch, 1873. So they were filing these reports, but the 9th Cavalry in Texas kept working. Instead of complaining, they kept working. Now, here's some things that happened to them. In 1870, I like Emmanuel Stone because he was only 5 feet tall. He was a short guy. I'm a short guy. He had the short guy complex. He was a short guy, but Emmanuel Stone worked his way up to sergeant because he could read and write. He came into the Army reading and writing. Emmanuel Stone. I called him Emmanuel Stone. He's Emmanuel Stance. He had the knack of out in battle. He had his people, let's just charge them. Just go straight at them with guns blazing. And they said, Emmanuel, that's not a good, strategy. He says, it's the way to go. So he just would always charge and charge. But he had such a bravery record that in 1867, Emmanuel Stance received the Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, you got to slow it down right there. Now, the Congress already questioned the bravery, the intelligence, the discipline, and the drive. Now, here's a black man in 4 years later winning the United States Congressional Medal of Honor. You can't go any higher than that. So Emmanuel Stantz won it. Right after him, another sergeant, Moses Williams, and Private Augusta Wiley were also given the Medal of Honor for splendid bravery, bravery exceeding expectations. So now the United States, like, something's off. Now we said these black soldiers were an experiment. Now why are we giving them the United States Medal of Honor? So these Buffalo soldiers, and that's why they are legendary, they kept working through these obstacles. So they went from being questioned, taunted, ridiculed. Now they're winning the highest awards given in the United States Army. Now, this is things I don't really, when I'm doing it to young children, I can't tell them some of the gory stuff because you can't talk. I was at a group of 16-year-olds last week, and I told them I can't talk about guns in front of the students, and they said okay, but y'all can handle it. This was a report filed. If you're into them westerns at all, they used to carry the big old payrolls across the stagecoaches. They didn't have direct deposits, and they didn't have electronic banking. Everything came across them big old stagecoaches. And sometimes those stagecoaches were attacked because people knew that the payroll was on them stagecoaches. So this is just a report that was filed in the military records. A bunch of Buffalo soldiers were escorting a big payroll on the stagecoach. And according to the reports that were fired, they got blindsided. And they got overrun by a large group of outlaws. They caught them at a blind spot, and it was a really, really bad, just a bad fight. But here are the things that happened. A Sergeant Brown, he just fought. He was shot several times, and they shot him on the right side, and he just pushed his gun to the left side, and he kept shooting. And this payroll guy filed an official report with his company, and these are the things that was in his payroll. He said, I too was a soldier. I served under General Grant, and I am proud that I served, and my record will show I was in 16 battles during the Civil War. But he says, I never, and I mean I never witnessed better courage, better fighting, and better discipline than shown by these black troops when they guarded that payroll. He says, I'm filing this report and I'm putting letters in there for inclusion. Simply because he filed that report, one of the soldiers, Sergeant Benjamin Brown, was also given the Medal of Honor. So, back into Texas, continued white troop harassment never left them. The white troops never wanted to fight side by side with the black troops, and it's just an unusual thing in the military, but you're talking the 1860s and the 1870s. Colonel Hatch filed a report on the harassment from the white troops. He didn't understand how they both could wear the same color uniform, have the same fighting opposition, but he says the black troops have to fight the external opposition and the internal opposition and the United States government for supplies. And he says there's too many battles for a troop to have to fight the external enemy, the internal enemy, and the United States government all at one time. But he says, my men, they just do it. They just do it. Now, the 9th Cavalry served for 8 continuous years in Texas. And according to the military records, their 5-year stretch up through 1874 is considered the hardest, most strenuous stretch given to any troops, black or white, on the Rio Grande, was fulfilled by the Buffalo Soldiers. No white troops ever had the records. According to the military records, by 1872, this is what the United States military called the 9th. They said the 9th Cavalry is a hard-hitting military fighting machine. Now, you got to remember, they came from being questioned on the Senate floor whether they were even worthy, and now in 1872, they are officially classified as a hard-hitting military fighting machine. In 1873, the United States said the elite troop in the state of Texas is the 9th Cavalry. No white cavalry was greater than the 9th Cavalry by 1873. So in spite of all those obstacles, they went from an experiment to the elite, the ultra elite in Texas. But they paid a price for being that good. All of their furloughs to go home were eliminated. They're the only troops in Texas that were not allowed to go see their wives, their children, or anything. They were so needed, according to the government, you have to keep them there because we need them. We need them. So they paid a dear price. Most of the men served their entire 5 years with no time off. They were in the saddle sometimes 7 days a week, month after month after month, because the better they got, the more that was asked of them. But these are the stories that no one ever hears about, is how well they did in the state of Texas. Several more of them, 14 of them out on the Old West received the Congressional Medal of Honor. Some more received it later on, but 14 of them received the United States Medal of Honor, which is the highest thing that you can get. And that's the kind of men they were. They are now making some movies. Bob Marley made the legendary song, and he made the song in Jamaica. And when the song came out, a lot of blacks were like, what is he talking about? The Buffalo Soldiers. A lot of our folks didn't even know the legacy of it, but Bob Marley did. So out there on the Old West, they continued to excel. Now, according to some records, chronic drunkenness that plagued the white troops were historically known for chronic drunkenness. That's part of the Wild West. I mean, I guess you're out there, you're isolated, you're lonely. But chronic drunkenness was never recorded in the 9th or the 10th Cavalry. It's probable because they knew that the world was looking at them. The world was hoping that they were going to fail. And they had to have higher standards that we cannot fail. We simply cannot fail because they're looking for us to fail. Now, they weren't angels. But there were certain things that they put limits on. Okay, so chronic drunkenness and things like that, they just didn't have those types of things. They, being the 10th Cavalry, established the all-time low in desertion for a year for any cavalry troop. It was the 10th with only 4 men. You might think 4, but only 4 men in the whole year of the 10th. He says the men of the 9th Cavalry over months had to march probably 1,000 miles. The last 200 miles were clearly in unknown territories to America. I cannot speak too highly of the conduct of the men under my command. Always cheerful, always ready, braving the severest hardships with constant food shortage supplies. He says the Negro soldier knows no fear and is capable of great endurance. I signed this report April 1870, Captain Morrow. Now he's saying the Negro soldier knows no fear, which totally contradicts those ivory tower senators who said, we question if they even have courage. So 4 years later, he's saying, they don't even know fear. Brigadier Penrose wrote this letter, and I'm wrapping it up. It's a classic letter he wrote from Fort Lyon. He says, I'm getting ready to retire. To the officers and the soldiers of the 10th Cavalry, having been relieved from command, I just want this opportunity to be given to me to bid you farewell. And I take this occasion. You started from this post on an important mission under many disadvantages. Your horses were in poor condition, and you were to march in unknown territories. You encountered severe storms, rain, snow, accompanied by intense winter cold. You were not outfitted properly with the right clothes for such weather. Your horses died day after day. You yourselves suffered intense cold, frostbitten all over your hands and your feet. But you still pushed. You pushed on, undaunted, undismayed, still anxious to fulfill your duties as a United States soldier. Few commands have ever been called upon to endure more than you have, and none have performed their duties any better than you have. To the officers and the men who so nobly stood with me in the most difficult times, I extend my thanks, and may success crown you all for your tremendous efforts as I leave the United States military. Respectfully, W.H. Penrose, Captain and Brigadier General. These are the kind of reports that these guys got. Now, in closing out, this is what the archives concluded about the Buffalo Soldiers. Once again, they weren't perfect. They weren't angels. And yes, they had some individual failures. But you can search the dusty archives and the records in vain, and you will not find instances where a detachment, a company, battalion, or regiment of any Buffalo soldiers who either ran away from their duties, who failed to do their duties, or dishonored the American flag. Their records deserve much, much more attention than they can get. In closing, they overcame all of the obstacles except one. There was one that they never, ever could overcome. No matter how hard they worked, this is the last piece of their legacy from the Western frontier. They never could overcome racism. No matter how they worked, no matter how many medals they won, no matter how many battles they won. They also have the highest victory rate of anybody in the U.S. Cavalry. They rarely lost battles. That's just another thing. I guess it's their code of conduct. They just simply had to prove themselves. But they were able to overachieve and overcome everything except the one obstacle called racism. They never, ever could overcome that one. So that's how their legacy in the Western frontier ends. Overcame everything except one obstacle. So as I conclude, that's a snapshot of the 9th and the 10th for the first 24 years out in what we call the Western frontier. You hardly will see them in the mainstream Western movies, but once again, from now on, when you see those cavalry troops coming across there to rescue and save people, you got to interject in your mind that a lot of those buglers saving those were people from the 9th and the 10th. So I do this in honor and memory of the outstanding legacy of the 9th and the 10th Cavalries, the U.S. Buffalo Soldiers. So we'll take questions because these are just concepts. From here, you go Google them, okay? Now, Google the monuments. If you don't Google anything else, Google monuments about the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, out in Kansas, Fort Leavenworth, Oklahoma, and things like that, they got all kinds of statues on these guys out there. They're just not big on the East Coast, okay? But you go out to the Midwest, they're big. They're big. When you go out on the Old West frontiers, yeah. So Google, start out with Fort Leavenworth and look at the massive statues and things, and then go to some of the other. Just Google statues, monuments, and then study them on your own, okay? But America should give them more credit. But now the irony of those segregated troops, in case you don't know, Segregated troops existed from 1867 all the way up to the Korean War. Okay? The Korean War at the start of 1950 was the first time that United States had fully integrated troops. Okay? They did not have them in World War I, World War II, and et cetera, Spanish-American War. In 1948, the same United States Senate passed the law, said it's time to do away with these fully segregated troops. So the Korean War, according to some Korean veterans that I know, were the first time that they fully fought together. Yes, sir.
Test.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sounds like they had the same kind of hardship and was facing racism like the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen. They had to fight, seem like similar battles, just to prove that they were equal or better than the others.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
That's a very good analogy. Showing superior skills when people don't think you have superior skills. Yes. Good analogy.
Hello, was class involved in
Was-
class?
Class,
Economic
like,
class, was that involved in the cavalry at that time?
class, like CLASS.
Yes.
Okay, class.
I mean,
Now, let me see if I'm answering your question. In the Old West from 1867 to 1891, class, the Buffalo Soldiers were always considered second class.
okay.
Yes, sir. They never, ever were considered first class to the white soldiers. Never.
Well, let me ask you this: were they basically poor economically, Buffalo soldiers?
Well, when they started,
I mean, the cavalry were the poor incorporated to join the cavalry at the time.
when they started, when they first enlisted, most of them were poor.
Okay.
Because once again, you're talking 1866.
Yeah.
1 year after slavery. The only people that enlisted that had real steady jobs were the ex-Union soldiers who had fought for the Union. Everybody, let's just say from the South. Yes, they were poor and illiterate.
Okay.
Because remember I said that 90% of them, according to the records, couldn't even read or write.
Right.
So you have to assume that they were poor, okay? So just remember, that's a good question. They started out illiterate, poor, ex-slaves to become elite soldiers within 5 years.
Okay.
Within 5 years, they turned it all the way around to become, once again, according to the records, the 9th Cavalry and the 10th, a hard-hitting, disciplined military fighting machine. That when you get that rating from, that's a pretty high rating. And then by 1873, the United States government said the 9th Cavalry was equal to or better than any white troops in the whole state of Texas. Any of them.
My next statement is in reference to class, did their stature and life rise when they became official Buffalo soldiers?
Once the statutes and start.
The stature and life did rise.
Oh, their stature in terms of
Stature,
mainstream America.
As far as were they given monies or?
Okay. Once again, they earned $10 a month, and the white soldiers earned $13 a month. Okay, so they were treated second class on the pay scale. Okay, and you got to remember, they were always given second-rate horses, second-rate food, second-rate clothing, second-rate ammunition, second-rate rifles. So the key word with the Buffalo Soldiers in terms of mainstream America, the key word was second-rate, 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 second-rate. They turned it all around to become elite. It wasn't that the United States government supported them to become elite. They had to overcome all of those obstacles and harassment from their peers of white soldiers who wouldn't even fight with them. And that's an odd situation when you're defending the same flag, and in terms of battle, they wouldn't even fight together.
That's probably today.
Okay.
Soldiers, they took the flag, but we said far from home.
But you got to remember, you don't find the Buffalo Soldiers complaining. They woke up every day, like those reports, eager. You remember those reports I was reading? Yeah. Eager to face the day, full of optimism, cheerful, undaunted, fearless. So you don't see, in those reports, you don't see the words complaining, whining, negative. They would just, if you go back and look at their records, they would just wake up. Okay, y'all ready today? Yeah, we ready. That's the way they thought. We ready. We ready. That's just the way they thought. So it just takes a special breed of human that can wake up knowing all these things are going, and like being in a locker room on a sports team. Yeah, we ready. When, the officer, y'all ready? Oh yeah, we ready. We ready. Okay. I mean that's and they thrived off of teamwork. I'm glad you asked those questions, because if you look at them, they thrived and required teamwork. Right. Every man had to pull his weight. Okay, you had to pull your weight because nobody had time to carry you. Just like with those bullets, no, you can't be shooting in trees and no. Discipline, which was one of the things that the Senate questioned in 1866. Did the black man even have discipline? They used discipline all the time to overcome these things. So everything that they were supposed to not have, within 4 years, the report said they exceeded everything. And sometimes when I'm talking, I wished I could send that message to all of our black youth. You think you got problems? Look at what these dudes did every day. They woke up and said, we ready. Whatever. We ready. And we're going to keep walking and achieving. Whether we eat well today or not, we're still going forward. How would they compensate it? Okay, let me give you one story. Clifton Creeves won the United States Medal of Honor. Okay? The United States Medal of Honor. When he died, his widow went to get his pension. And they told her, we don't have no records of a Clifton Cleaves in the United States military. She said, wait a minute. Here's his medal. He won the Medal of Honor. They said, ma'am, we don't have no military records on a Clifton Cleaves. They kept giving her the runaround, because they didn't want to give her the pension. She finally got a lawyer who said, just let me take this case for free. And he went and told them, you better find this man's records, okay? Because the man won the highest record. So even in death, second rate. Okay? How can you win the Medal of Honor and then you go for your husband and then we don't have no records? But you gave him the Medal of Honor. You know there's a protocol. There's a process. You are not just given the Medal of Honor. So no matter what we did, there was the one hurdle we never could overcome. We never could overcome the racism, even in life or death. Yeah, they made Clifton Creeves' wife jump through some serious hoops just to get a little tiny pension check. Because according to some of the people, y'all don't deserve the pension checks either. It was constant. It's constant, okay? Good questions. That's good dialogue. Good stuff.
Anybody else have any questions?
But I tell you one thing, in the schools, these guys should be required learning, okay? Instead of, they say, well, we don't want to study stuff and stuff. If I had anything to do with any curriculums, these guys they should be required learning in every public school. I mean, that's my editorial. They should be. They should, because of what they serve the country, but they show you how to achieve and how to overcome and how to deal with adversity. And for our children who might run away at the slightest adversity today, these guys had adversity every day of their lives and they never backed down. So they have so many teachables, so many. Take the gun piece out. Just the human stuff is the teachable stuff that should be required. Somebody had there. Yes.
Thank you so much for your life and your work. This is such a beautiful story that I've never heard before. And I was just hoping, if it doesn't exist, that sometime in the future, that maybe there could be like a congressional fund to honor like the descendants of the Buffalo Soldiers.
I tell you what, and I think I brought it. I don't know if you remember, before he died, the Honorable Colin Powell got in a big debate. And you may not have picked up on the debate because he flexed his muscles. He went out and demanded that Fort Leavenworth honor the Buffalo Soldiers with some serious permanent statues. And he said, this is where they started. And you know, Colin says, I'm whatever he was. And so study what Colin Powell did, because those Fort Leavenworth has some majestic stuff. And I think the children in Kansas have to study them. But Colin flexed his muscles and said, you're gonna honor the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, but back to your question, it should be, these guys should be in our DNA. They should be in our DNA because they continued in World War I, the Spanish-American War, and World War II. I just didn't have time to go through them. But these are, hate to say it this way, these are some serious brothers right here. They were some serious. In Texas, they became so good, they made them work in isolation in the parts of the Old West where whites had never been. They sent them to scout for months at a time in places that no one knew, okay? So not only were they discriminated against, they were isolated too. And that's why that last letter where he said they sent you in places where you shouldn't have been without clothing and all the supplies, because they paid a price for being so good, okay? Sometimes you can be good and you get penalized for being good, okay? The places that the white troops could not handle it, they did it, okay? Yes.
Hi, thank you for that. When you stated that, I don't really have a question, I have a comment, but when you just stated that the Buffalo Soldiers should be in our DNA, I can truly agree with that and attest to that, and I feel that they are in my DNA because I'm a 20-year Navy veteran.
All right now.
And
all right now.
Thank you.
You should have come up here and helped me.
No, you were doing great. Trust me. But, and I just wanted to mention that because years after, the Civil War and after the Buffalo Soldiers served from 1866 to like 1951, basically,
Okay.
it was still prevalent, the discrimination.
Really?
The racism. I was on my ship, at one point, I was the only black person on my ship in a leadership role.
Okay.
And I felt the discrimination. I felt the divide.
Okay.
From the same personnel, the same chiefs, the same rank.
Oh.
We're fighting, like you said, one team, one fight. But I felt the isolation at some times, at some points. And like you said, it was in my DNA every day to wake up with that bravery, that courage, and that discipline to keep going, because I felt that I owed it to those junior personnel that would see me, whether black, white, Asian, didn't matter.
Okay.
They saw me every day fighting, smile on my face, hard charging, getting up every single day and making it happen. So
Okay.
when I hear the story of the Buffalo Soldiers, it resonates with me. It still gives me goosebumps.
Okay.
And your delivery was awesome. And
Okay, well, thank you.
the point was well made that
Okay.
they should definitely be in our DNA.
Okay.
Because when we get up every day, all of us, we fight every day for another day, regardless of what the world puts on our shoulders and on our backs. We're still here and we're still fighting. So they're definitely a part of our DNA.
No,
Thank you.
we got to let's give her, come on, y'all, for your service. Now, one ironic point, I want to close on this one. I was giving this lecture last year at a college, and a historian was there, and he sent me an email, and he said, do you know there is a Buffalo Soldier buried in Shelby? And I said, no, I'm in Shelby, North Carolina. You probably talking about Shelby, Tennessee. He said, no. There's a Buffalo Soldier buried in Shelby, North Carolina. I said, no, it ain't. I said, I've been there all my life. It made no sense. He said, I'm going to send you the records. And there is a Buffalo Soldier from the 10th Cavalry. We still don't know why he's buried there. We're trying to figure out how he got there. But I'll show you a picture on my phone. His name is Private Charles Parks. And he died in 1936, and he's buried in Shelby, and I have put it on social media, and so far, nobody in Shelby has claimed him to be a relative. We don't exactly know why he's buried in Shelby, but they sent a clipping on his military. They sent us a little bit on his military records. We know his children left, and they lived in Milwaukee, but he is ironically buried 5 blocks from my old neighborhood. So I go to my old neighborhood at least 3 times a week, and I just wave at him because I go by his grave sometimes, but I waved at him yesterday because I can see it's a little tiny graveyard, and I can see his grave because I know exactly where it is. So I, point or give him a high five, but it's ironic. Yeah. He's buried in Shelby. We just don't know how he got there, but he's from the 10th Cavalry. But anyway, so you just never, sometimes when you're lecturing, you just never know who's in the audience and things like that. But God bless y'all and thank you for attending. And hopefully it just triggers something. Okay? Any more questions? Well, I'll just try. I got 3 or 4 places between now and Sunday. Like I said, this is our Christmas month. Everybody wants us this month, so I'm on a roll. Yes,
I'd ask a question and I go back in time.
Okay.
I was right here for the first lecture you gave on ancient history.
Okay, on these, yes, sir. Probably this book.
Have you read the bookstore Legacy?
Yeah, I loaned it out to somebody. And I just got it back. Yeah. James, yeah. I read them all. See, a lot of us were historians before the internet. Right. See, that's how old some of us are. Yeah. We were doing this stuff before the internet. Y'all just don't know how hallelujah when the internet came out. Because see, we had to go search for books and you had to read them cover to cover because there was no Googling, cutting, and pasting and stuff like that. So it's like some of us are built on the foundation. So we're glad we had to do it the old way. Yeah, but we were pre-internet people. We laugh now like, what were we thinking? what were we thinking? Okay. I did bring books in case you always travel with books, so I did bring books.
Thank you so much for coming out. This was an amazing event. We had 15, 20 people online watching too, so I'm really glad everybody got a chance to come out tonight. I do also want to thank our NAACP friends from South Carolina traveling all this way to come out tonight. Just as a quick announcement before we wrap up for the evening, don't forget we have our Souls to the Polls on Sunday. It's at 1 p.m. at Greater Bethel A.M.E. Church. If you would like some more information, Harriet and I will be here afterwards, or you can email the NAACP, Charlotte Buckenberg. There's nothing else going on right now, so we're going to move to adjourn for the evening. But thank you again for coming out, and thank you all.
Thank you.